Charlie Munger once said, high IQ people make terrible investors. That sounds like a joke. It isn't. And the people proving him right hardest right now, this year, aren't who you'd expect. They're the founders and investors the market keeps betting against and outperforming anyway.
Here's the pattern researchers keep finding, and it should bother you if you've ever assumed the smartest person in the room wins. Warren Buffett has said flatly that success in investing doesn't correlate with IQ. Temperament matters more. Munger went further. A lot of people with high IQs are terrible investors because they have terrible temperaments. And it's not just an old man's opinion. A study out of Indiana University's Kelley School of Business found that emotional intelligence explains roughly 89% of the difference between successful and unsuccessful entrepreneurs. IQ explained about 11%, 89 to 11. That's not a small edge. That's basically the whole game, and it should reshape who you assume is going to win before you even see their resume. So if intelligence isn't the deciding factor, what actually is? Staying level when everyone else panics, reading a room instead of dominating it, knowing what you don't know. Over the next 15 minutes, you're going to see exactly who's been living that lesson hardest and winning because of it, against odds most of us never have to think about. Take Melody Hobson, co-CEO of Ariel Investments, one of the most respected value investing shops in the country, managing money for institutions and everyday investors alike. She has a phrase for the trait that actually makes decisions work under pressure: confident humility. Not confidence, not humility. Both at the same time. Conviction strong enough to act, and enough humility to admit when the facts have changed. That combination sounds soft. It isn't. It's why she's still making calls that hold up decades later. Compare that to the instinct most of us have. Treat "I don't know" like a confession of weakness instead of the most honest thing you can say. People who can say it plainly, without flinching, make better decisions than people who need to have an opinion on everything. Ego doesn't just fail to help here, it actively gets in the way. A closed mind, a need to always be right, an unwillingness to update, those things can neutralize real intelligence completely. Confident humility is the antidote, and it shows up again and again in the investors and founders this video is actually about. Nobel-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman spent a career on one uncomfortable idea, what he called, "What you see is all there is." We systematically ignore what we can't see, and it never occurs to us that the thing we're missing might overturn everything we believe. Markets have blind spots too, and here's one, stated at a stage as prominent as Web Summit. Black and Latino founders currently receive only about 4% of all venture capital funding in the United States, while representing 32% of the population. That gap works out to roughly $400 billion a year in capital that should be flowing and isn't, according to the Open Opportunity Fund's Dr. Paul Judge. 4%. Not because the businesses aren't performing, you'll see the growth numbers in a moment, because the people writing checks aren't seeing them. The exact blind spot Kahneman warned about, playing out with real money at scale. Keep that number in your head. Everything else in this video is what that 4% has been quietly doing anyway. Here's a truth about memory. Once you know how a story ends, the struggle that got there quietly disappears from how you remember it. That's exactly what's happening to the fastest growing part of the American economy right now, and almost nobody's telling the story. According to Brookings' analysis of Census Bureau data, Black-owned employer businesses grew 62% between 2017 and 2023, nearly 20 times the overall U.S. business growth rate of just 3.3%. They crossed 200,000 firms for the first time, generating $249 billion in revenue and supporting over 1.8 million jobs. And yet Black Americans still make up only 3.4% of employer business owners, against 14.4% of the population. The growth is real, the ceiling is still there. Most people looking at the finished picture assume it was always this way, slow and small. It wasn't slow, it was this fast, this recently, against resistance most successful people never have to face. Daymond John started FUBU with $40, sewing hats in his mother's basement in Queens, New York. He got rejected by manufacturer after manufacturer. He ran out of money more than once and nearly lost the business before it had a real chance to exist. The difference between him and most people who fail at that stage isn't that he failed less, it's what he did with it. Every setback became information instead of a verdict. What didn't work, why, and what to try next. That's the actual skill he says he's looking for now, on the other side of the table, as an investor evaluating other founders on Shark Tank. Not a flawless track record, but someone who's already proven they can lose and come back smarter. Being right the first time is overrated. Recovering well is the rarer, more valuable trait, and it's the one that actually compounds over an entire career. Munger's temperament argument and John's basement to boardroom story are the same lesson, told two completely different ways.
Success isn't always about outrunning everyone else. Sometimes it's about a smaller, quieter advantage compounding for longer than anyone's watching. The U.S. Small Business Administration's Office of Advocacy found that Asian American households who own a business have a net worth more than 4 times greater than Asian American households who don't. Asian-owned firms now account for 11.5% of U.S. employer businesses, with $1.2 trillion in receipts, and Asian American purchasing power has grown further and faster than almost any other groups over the past 2 decades. That advantage didn't come from beating the market at some dramatic singular moment. It came from a relative edge, ownership instead of employment, held consistently for years, while it compounded quietly in the background. That's the same principle behind why relative skill in investing often matters more than being brilliant in some absolute sense. You don't need to be the best investor in the world. You need a durable edge, applied consistently, for longer than everyone else is willing to wait.
Entrepreneurship research keeps landing on the same finding. Emotional intelligence predicts who succeeds far better than credentials or raw intellect do. But here's the part that gets left out of that finding. For a lot of founders, staying humble isn't a personality quirk. It's costing them money. Black-owned businesses are 2.5 times more likely to be denied a bank loan than non-Black firms, according to Pew Research Center. Only about 10% secure bank loans versus roughly 25% for white-owned firms. And separately, business advisors keep flagging the same internal pattern. Minority founders underpricing their own work, avoiding self-promotion, treating confidence itself like something to apologize for, even when the work clearly justifies charging more. One of those problems is the system. The other is a habit. Emotional intelligence means reading a room well enough to know the difference, when humility serves you and when it's quietly working against you. The founders who figured that distinction out are the ones beating both problems at once.
More years in the job should make you more humble, not less, but that's rarely what actually happens. Experience tends to breed overconfidence instead, a growling certainty that you've already seen everything worth seeing. Dennis Fitzpatrick, founding CEO of the CA Corporation, a tribal enterprise, describes his actual job differently: to be a skilled listener and analyze all the information I can before I make a decision. That's a deliberate rejection of the instinct that seniority earns you the right to stop listening. It's a value that runs deep in Native business leadership specifically. Among the Lakota, leaders were chosen for respect, humility, and bravery, not credentials. And those same principles are now steering modern tribal enterprises through renewable energy, broadband, and defense contracting. According to the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis, Native-owned businesses have grown 36% since 2012 to over 400,000 firms nationwide, even though less than a quarter of them can bank within 2 miles of where they actually operate. If you can't explain something simply, one of 2 things is true: you don't understand it, or you're hiding something. That rule applies to numbers too, and here's a number that cuts through a lot of noise. According to Stanford Graduate School of Business's State of Latino Entrepreneurship Report, Latino-owned businesses grew 44% between 2018 and 2023, spreading well beyond the restaurants and retail people picture into professional services, construction, and real estate. In that same window, the number of white-owned businesses fell 3%. Say that plainly, and it needs no spin. The fastest-growing group of business owners in the country isn't the one most people picture when they hear fastest-growing. No caveat needed. No complicated argument, just a number stated clearly that overturns an assumption most people have never bothered to question. That's what clarity does that complexity can't. It doesn't let you hide from what the data is actually saying, including when the data is more impressive than the story you'd been told. Success has a way of moving the goalpost on you. Hit a milestone and your brain resets to expect the next one immediately. Yesterday's win becomes today's baseline. That's dangerous if it makes you blind to real progress, simply because it hasn't reached parity yet. Consider this: the number of Black and Latino venture capital investors in the US has surged 76%, now totaling 550 investors across 406 funds, according to Harlem Capital's Power 550 report. That's not the finish line, remember? Funding to founders is still stuck around 4%, but it's real, fast movement in exactly the part of the pipeline that decides who gets funded next. The founders and investors actually pulling this off have to hold two things at once without losing their grip on either. Acknowledge how far there still is to go, while genuinely registering how much has already changed since they started. Most people can only manage one of those at a time.
Money is a bad reason to do something this difficult for 15 years straight. The founders and investors in this video, statistically, faced worse odds at nearly every stage along the way. Worse loan approval odds, smaller funding rounds even when they did get funded, fewer mentors sitting inside their existing networks. People don't absorb that much friction year after year for a paycheck. They absorb it because the work itself means something bigger than the paycheck, building something that outlasts them, proving a door was never actually locked the way everyone assumed, changing what the next founder who looks like them believes is even possible. That intrinsic pull, not the incentive waiting at the other end of it, is what actually produces quality work over the long run. It's the same reason the most financially successful people you'll ever read about rarely describe money as the actual point. It was always a byproduct of something else they were chasing first, something that mattered regardless of what it paid. So here's where all 12 of these truths land, together in one place. McKinsey's research on diverse founding teams found something the market should have priced in years ago. Founding teams with greater gender and ethnic diversity deliver 30% higher returns for investors at exit, and companies with greater racial and ethnic diversity in leadership are 35% more likely to post financial returns above their industry's median. Not despite the traits this video just spent 12 lessons walking through, because of them. Temperament over intellect, confident humility over ego, listening over asserting, graceful failure over false certainty, clarity over spin. Those were never soft feel-good qualities running parallel to good business, off in their own separate lane. They are the actual mechanism producing the better returns, and the market's own 4% blind spot is what's standing between real capital and the highest performing place it could currently be flowing toward.
None of this required being the smartest person in the room. It required temperament, humility, the willingness to fail gracefully and keep listening long after you think you already know the answer. Traits the data says predict success better than raw intellect ever did, playing out hardest in exactly the founders and investors the system keeps underestimating. The businesses are growing faster than almost anyone's telling you. The investors backing them are showing up in far greater numbers than 5 years ago. The only thing still lagging behind all of it is where the money's actually going. If you want more research-backed breakdowns of what actually drives success, not the mythology, the data, subscribe so you don't miss the next one.